Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's the Shipping Pod. Hello and welcome to the Shipping Pod. I'm Tim Dooner, here with the returning
Ryan Dooley.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. To get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial, please visit www.audibletrial.com/theshippingpod. They have over 180,000 books to choose from for your Kindle, iPhone, MP3 player, and whatever else you got that plays sound, Ryan.
Indeed. My Walkman? My Discman?
Maybe. You could put it on tape. You could go backwards. You could backward engineer it. Cassettes are back in style. I was actually at the library today with my son in the children's library, and we were playing with the Where's Waldo books, but I imagine that wouldn't make much sense for Audible, right?
No, a visual location effort would not play as well on the, Audible books that you may read on the highway. The state troopers won't appreciate it, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, probably not. They could make, I guess, an interactive, submersive version. But I guess, you know what book I will recommend?
What's that?
The Dressmaker by Rosalie Han. And this is one that I just saw the movie for on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah?
It stars the lovely Kate Winslet, who I think has just aged beautifully. I'm a big fan of hers.
Kate Winslet is...
Titanic, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, yeah. No. She was quite an attractive young lady back in her Titanic days. I don't believe I've seen her in anything recently, though.
Well, the movie to me, it seemed like the kind of movie that Tim Burton would make now if he could. Instead of sort of the odd, gaudy, weird kitsch that he makes, this movie looks like the kind of style that Tim Burton wishes he could make.
Like Edward Scissorhands style?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and watch Edward Scissorhands, that seems almost subdued compared to what he does with like Alice in Wonderland and those kind of films. And this particular movie is dark and quirky, but not overbearingly so.
Okay.
And the cinematography is fantastic. I highly recommend it. So I'm going to check out the book too, The Dressmaker. That's nice. At audibletrial.com/theshippingpod.
I actually found a textbook on audible.com. They have textbooks. They have different things like that. And I've been, it's not the textbook for the class that I'm in, but I thought it couldn't hurt for me to listen to some informational stuff while I'm driving around, try and better my brain.
Yeah.
While, passively sitting in traffic on Route 93. So, you have that option as well. So, aside from just entertaining, you could also better yourself.
So Ryan, you weren't here in the week. Any news of what's happened over the past, I don't know, since the last time we heard from you, episode 7?
Well, it's been an adventure. Been an adventure, that's for sure. I've been traveling the New England market, getting a gauge on things, and I will pass this information out there because it's pretty well known in the industry. Is that it's going to be a rough year as far as rates go. That's what I gleaned after the past 14 days since the last time we sat down and spoke. So in the past 14 days, I've determined it's going to be a long one. It's going to be a long year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that report just came out as well that the spot rates are going down for the month. That's definitely not going to help contract season. And
sure not.
Coming out with MCQ pricing. You weren't here last week, but one of the... and we can go back to it a little bit later because I did have some contract season questions for you.
Sure.
But what I was kind of going on about was kind of the dirty little secret of this business where MCQs are... I mean, it's written down on paper. It looks like a contract.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a contract. Everybody spends months stressing about this, trying to get the rates down, but there's really no repercussions at all if someone doesn't fulfill their MCQ.
MQC.
Sorry, the MQC.
Okay. Sorry, for a minute there I was taking us... Sorry, I was trying to work on something in my brain. Yes. Yes and no. The dirty secret in the industry is that traditionally people are not pursued for what we refer to as shortfall or coming up short on the MQC. And if that be the case, you'd say it's a cost-benefit analysis type situation. There is a penalty that's built into the contract, and it's built in from the FMC to prevent people from going out and, promising the world to, get secure rates and such like that. But and that is a monetary penalty, as in you'll pay X amount per box that you come up short. However, at the end of the contract, if you come up 100 TEU short on your contract, you have to weigh it out. Is it better for you to go into that person, waive that part of the agreement to try and pursue a longer agreement? So you are correct. In practice, the dirty secret is no one's ever going to come after anyone for MQC. Short of if you did something gross they being the customer in this case, the BCO or MVO or whatever it is. If you did something grossly inappropriate to your carrier, they may choose to pursue you on that, if for no other reason, just to make an example. But that would not be ideal in the long run.
Yeah, well, I brought it up as you mentioned spot rates. So when spot rates go under people's MQCs, that's when you start seeing BCOs shop the market a little bit, correct?
Yeah. Typically, as the spot rate goes, so goes the BCO support of the direct carrier contract. I mean, the traditional market out there right now is that most major BCOs keep about 30% of their cargo unallocated to the direct steamship lines for that exact purpose, so that when the spot rate benefits them, they can play to the MVO market and play the spot rate, and when it doesn't benefit them, they can lean heavy on their MQC and try to push as much cargo as they can with the carrier. So it is it's an interesting part of the game there. As the spot rate gets volatile, it really does disturb. It really shakes up the apple cart.
And when they start to get too high, the reverse can happen, where suddenly BCOs are finding their cargo not getting on ships.
Yeah, well, it's an unfortunate reality about it is that when the spot rate gets too high and they want to leave the NVO support behind and kind of move more towards the direct carrier route, there's a possibility that the carrier may have moved on from that customer, so to speak, where if you go 2 months without giving a container to a carrier and then all of a sudden you show up and you want to put 20 boxes on it, it's very unlikely that all 20 boxes are going to be able to be booked on that boat. And the unfortunate part is that by playing that game, they end up leaving themselves in a position, they being the BCO in this case, leaving themselves into a position where they have to use the spot rate, which is going to be considerably higher than what they would normally pay with the carrier. That's why I say the best case is to be as consistent as possible. Book as much as you can on a consistent basis with the BCOs. Play the spot market as it suits you, but it is a short-lived venture. If you're a major BCO, you really open yourself to a lot of challenges in that case.
Yeah. Well, May 1st is rapidly approaching it, and
isn't it, though?
I know that your boots are deep in the contract season mud.
I am. I would go so far as to say I am knee-deep in contract season.
Obviously, without revealing any proprietary information or anything, what's it like on your end, on the steamship line end, to go through contract season?
Painful.
Yeah.
No.
How so? What are the pain points, though?
It's not that bad. Okay, we'll say on the good side, the contract season is concentrated. It's focused. Everybody's on the same page. Everyone's looking for relatively the same stuff. So you have the majority of the answers to questions readily at hand. There's not a whole lot of research that needs to be done on a broad sense. The pain points, though, that you asked about, you're dealing with high-stakes negotiations on every level. There's not going to be a day during the week where you're not going to come across a customer that, if things go bad today, it could severely impact the entire volume for the year. And, it's a pretty high-stakes game of poker to be playing. In addition to that, you're dealing with a finite amount of resources to deal with all of these major decisions. I mean, trade teams are heavily involved nowadays. It's very rare for an individual salesperson like myself to be able to sit down and actually hammer out a deal and know all the pricing points that need to be hit for the company as well as for the customer. So you have to work closely with your trade team. Well, if there's 10 people on a trade team, there's about 30 Ryans all over the country that all have 5 to 10 major BCOs that they're dealing with. So whatever the math behind that is, it's several hundred major contracts kind of coming down the pipe at the same time. And so you're dealing with a finite amount of resources. So it's very important from my side of the table to make sure that information is flowing back and forth, getting what you need from the customer, passing it on to the trade team, and vice versa, coming from trade back to the customer. That's the real killer pain point there, because everybody wants everything yesterday. Every customer wants the information already, and the trade team wants to know what the next round of feedback is all about from the get-go.
Last week, I was reading from a pretty detailed report in the Journal of Commerce, and they were they were interviewing shippers and BCOs, and that issue of the MQC shortfalls had come up.
Mm-hmm.
How does a company like, I'm sure obviously it's a case-by-case basis on how you would deal with it, but is there some sort of metric that is used to determine when someone's good to do business with or when someone's not to do good business with? You mentioned that if they try to bring 20 containers on out of the blue and they had 500 TUs promised to you, they're at 100 of those. It's 9 months into the year. You haven't heard from them in months. The spot rate market is in the toilet.
Yeah.
Then they got 20 containers for you. Is that the kind of thing where you don't want to go back to the table with a company come May 1st, or is it just something that happens within the industry?
It's pretty unlikely for that drastic of a version of that scenario, but even on a lesser, take it to a lesser scale to that. Say you're not 9 months in. Say you're 6 months in, and because the way a lot of carriers will measure it is that they look at service contract production. If you have an MQC of 100 TEUs, that means that 6 months in, you should approximately have somewhere around 50 TEUs already shipped with us, and another 50 up for grabs. If we get to the 6 month mark and we've only seen 10 or 15 of those TEUs, there's going to be significant pressure from upper management pushing down, trying to determine what's the problem. Why aren't they shipping with us? If it's a purely rate-driven thing, then it's on the carrier to make sure that they let them know, if you try to do a mad rush at the end of the year, you are not going to reach your MQC, and that's going to be a real problem for us. More realistically, it's going to be a problem for the BCO at a greater length, because like we said, the shortfall threat is a somewhat idle threat, but it's going to be a problem for them because at some point those rates are going to rebound, because at some point the spot rate is going to climb above their contract rate, and they won't be able to exercise as much authority as they think they would be able to with their containers. So getting back to the core of the problem, wandering off of my own tangent there, getting back to the core question is that it won't make you walk away from that business, because in all honesty, there's no way that any reasonable company or salesperson lets it go to that extent. So they should be. If you continue to go to a customer and you continue to push them, and you never see any of the bookings, and at the end of the year they've done 5% of their MQC, that would be a red flag. If you've done everything you can, you honestly know that you've tried to speak with them, you actually made a relationship and actual contact with them, yeah, in those cases, you let that one go away. And I got to tell you, it's not like a tit for tat type of thing, but at some point down the road, they're going to run into an equipment issue or some kind of a service issue, and they're going to want to come back. And when they do, they often come back and saying, hey, I'd like to reactivate this rate I had. And by that time, typically, they're like, no, well, you play the spot market. You'll get the spot rate from us. We can make it into a contract, but you're going to get the spot rate that it's at currently, which typically by that point will be higher. So yeah. It's got all kinds of parameters.
Yeah. How many times do you see yourself going back and forth with prospective clients or even existing clients in contract period? For you guys, this is kind of the bulk of your business, right? It kind of sets up your year. You can have a pretty decent indication if you're doing well or not doing well after May 1st.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll know by the beginning of May where we fall as far as how likely it is that we're going to hit the goals that we've set as a company. The bulk of our business, because of the nature of the company I work for, is based on the inbound market, the import market from primarily Asia. In addition to that, we do have a strong market on the export side going on the same thing in the Asian market, but it will always make up significantly less. And I don't know off the top of my head what the percentage break is, but I know for this market here, for the Boston and New England market, my import TEUs make up roughly about 80% of the business that I'll do for the year. And the other remaining 20% is all in the export market, but that export market will be a smattering of transatlantic, transpacific, some Central America, very little, but it's going to be interesting also with the new alliances. There's going to be some shifts in that, so that could also change up that mix. But yeah, you have a pretty good gauge on it. And your first question there, and I'm not sure if you were asking when you're saying how many times do you go back and forth to the customer, do you mean like how many rounds are typically, how many rounds of bidding, so to speak?
Sure. So how much pricing feedback do you typically receive? How involved is the process, at least on your end, on the sales end? In this business, there's always ops involved, and obviously there's certain mountains you can't move.
Yeah. Typically what I've found is it's about 3 rounds of bidding. And within those 3 rounds of bidding, it's anywhere from 5 to 6 rounds of getting price feedback from customers. So there's like an initial conversation where you get an indication of how far off from the previous year's pricing you are. And once you put together that bit of a proposal, you take it to trade and then come back to them. And then it's okay. We could go for, customer gives you a heads up. We could do 10% less. You go back to them. You guys are right in the middle of the pack. So if you want to do another bid. So it's anywhere between, in my opinion, 3 to 6 rounds of back and forth there. But typically, the bigger a company is, the more regular you do business with them, it limits it pretty significantly. You go in there and you kind of get an indication. There's going to be 3 rounds. Come in with your best rate the first round, and then the second and third round is more about service levels, transit times, equipment guarantees, et cetera, et cetera. It's less about, the bigger the company, the less the negotiations about rate, the more they're about what can you guarantee me. Whereas the smaller companies, it's almost 100% about rate, and it's very little about equipment and space guarantees.
So, again, we covered this a bit of this last week, but I guess I have one more question for you here. Do you have any tips or survival guide or golden nuggets of knowledge you could impart with someone who's going through contract season right now, either as an SSL, a NVOCC, or as a BCO?
I think the best advice that I can give someone is the earlier the better in contract season. Because, two pieces of advice, earlier the better, or do the diametrically opposed portion. If you're able to, if you're capable of doing it, do it in June or July. Steamship lines are always willing to sign a contract under whatever period that the customer wants. So you can do it in June, October, whenever. I like those because you get 100% of the steamship line's attention because they've essentially negotiated 90% of the business that they're going to move on that lane 6 months prior. Additionally, they're 6 months in. There's a very strong likelihood that there's some weaknesses in the chain. There are some lanes that they're not getting support, so you can actually utilize that type of timing to apply pressure to say, well, what lanes are you guys a little bit light on? What ones did you not win from your other BCOs? And if you have a straightforward salesperson, like that's my style of selling, is I would share with them and say, take for instance, we'd like a little bit more business on the South Atlantic port calls coming from China. So anything that moves from China-based ports to Savannah, Charleston, we'd like to see that increase.
You mentioned that steamship lines are willing to sign a contract at any point in the year. So how did May 1st become the official or unofficial date of the beginning of contract season?
That's a good idea. A good question, rather. I honestly do not know why this part of the season. I don't know for a fact. I would speculate, and I can take a stab. It's far enough away. It's almost like halfway in between the major Christmas retail season and Chinese New Year, which is, we've talked about in the past, is a huge thing. So it's several months after that, so people have calmed down, gotten all of their fiscal year projections in so they can start to build an idea of what they think they're going to ship in the upcoming year. But it's also far enough away from it that they're not trying to negotiate this and also try to get it done. They're not closing it. If you were a huge, if you were CVS and you started this process in June, you might be in the middle of trying to get the bulk of retail stuff here before the Christmas rush, all in a matter of 1 month that you have from closing of contract to actually getting it done. And the problem you have there is you don't want to be negotiating a contract with someone when your contract is against the wall and about to expire. Everybody wants it to be done fast, so things are rushed and you don't have a due diligence implied. So I would imagine it's the dead even point in between the market.
So it's like apartment hunting in Boston where it's on a September 1st schedule. Because of the colleges, they drive the market. There's no housing authority that forces it to be September 1st, but if you're looking for an apartment in Boston, that's when 99% of the rentals are done.
I did not know that. Oh. Well, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, though.
Yeah, and they're kind of locked in that market, just like maybe May 1st, there's the Federal Maritime Commission, there's no regulatory body saying it has to be May 1st, right?
To my knowledge, I don't believe there's any kind of regulation indicating that at all. Simply because, we do negotiations all the time in February, March, and April. We'll do negotiations, but we might finish a negotiation in March, and they might ask that it not take effect until mid-April. I mean, they might want it to be on a schedule that just operates on their own. However, my assumption is that once people started negotiating during this period of time, now everyone negotiates in this period of time. For kind of the exact opposite of what I recommended with the 6-month window of doing it in June, is that they don't run the risk. They're guaranteed to get pretty similar rates to their competitors if they all negotiate at the same time, not in collusion with one another, but at the same time period. because the market is what the market is. People are going to know things. So if you get a $1,500 rate, and you got to give the next guy $1,500 or close to it.
Yeah.
If, however, in 6 months, that rate maybe could naturally in the market be a couple hundred higher, there's nothing to stop you from offering it a couple $100 higher.
The cycle, too, just of the entire process means that even if someone wanted to move to another steamship line, they're probably already locked into the MQC with another group, because since everyone's on May 1st, everyone is on May 1st.
Yep. I honestly don't know if it's a good or bad thing, to tell you the truth. I really don't. I feel like there's a lot of pros to it, like we just talked about. And then I feel like at the same time, though, it was like everybody's pulling for it. If the rates hit low enough, which they have recently in the past couple of years really gotten low enough, the other downside is that everyone could simultaneously, again, not in collusion with one another, but we're all reading the same data. Everyone could turn around and say, you know what? Jack the rates up 1,000. Let's just everybody move the floor up one. And
yeah.
It's a possibility, but unlikely, but a possibility.
So during the week, I was reading a very interesting article, and I saw a YouTube video with it. It was a fascinating story, but I have a question for you. When you were in the academy and when you were out at sea, what kind of procedures did they have in place for when a ship was sinking?
Well, you do fire and boat drills all the time. So, essentially it's an abandoned ship drill, but I mean, it's it's pretty standard procedure there. I mean, there's anyone who's been on like a cruise ship, it's essentially the same thing as when you're on a cruise ship. There's a map in your room. Go to this lifeboat, and there's horn signals and everything like that to tell you exactly what to do. But it's all about abandoned ship. They also speaking of your Titanic reference from earlier, is the basic stuff beyond getting into a lifeboat, though, is you want to get down to you want to abandon ship at the last possible minute. You want to stay out of the water as long as you can, and you want to get to the lowest part of the ship that's closest to the water, not jumping from, say, the bridge of a ship.
Sure. Get sucked down into the vortex with the
yes, that is a very real possibility.
Well, so let's say the ship is going down too fast, though. There's no chance for abandoned ship, or the too big of a storm. The vessel's not there. I'm getting somewhere with this, but was there a secondary measure they may have trained you in case there was no way to get overboard?
If you're talking about
like a taking on water drill or anything to that effect?
No, top of my head, no. What do you got?
Well, so in 2013, there was a ship known as the Jascon 4. Okay. This was a tugboat, so smaller vessel, and it looked pretty much like the tugboats you see around here that come up to steamships. Mm-hmm. Well, they sent this ship 20 miles off the coast of Nigeria out to get a Chevron tanker because bad water was coming in. They wanted to expedite the process. Mm-hmm. However, the storm was too rough and the seas were too rough that the ship capsized and sank. It went all the way to the bottom of the ocean. The tanker was recovered and they got back to shore. 2.5 days later, they send out a recovery vessel, and they send down 8 divers, and this crew gets down to the ship 90 feet down in the ocean. And they're going through all the different corridors. Mm-hmm. When out into the darkness, a hand grabs one of the divers. And you can see it on the video too, because they have recording devices on their helmets.
Are they able
and
to
the control
stay in the air pocket?
Yeah, well, you can't hear the divers. You can't hear the divers speak. You can hear the control room speak on the other end, and you can hear like them gasp in shock. It's like a jump scare in a movie.
Yeah.
Well, they get up, and yes, this guy Harrison O'Keen, he was the cook on this particular vessel. Mm-hmm. And when they were taking in water, everyone went into their quarters. There was no time to get overboard. It sank that quick. And according to him, it was the middle of the night. He happened to not be in his quarters. He was in the captain's quarters, the living quarters, on the bathroom as the ship was sinking. And he couldn't believe it. He got to the bottom. All the lights were flickering out. The room somehow was sealed enough that it didn't completely fill with water immediately.
Wow.
So he ends up in this quarters, stuck in there. He takes 2 mattresses and he's floating on them under the sea. He found a couple cans of Coke and he lived off the Coke. His legs from the salt water were chafing away. His tongue was getting all chafed from the salt water as well and dehydrated.
Oh my God.
He couldn't get out of the ship because he was locked into the room, but he could hear marine life thrashing about on the other side, and he just assumed it was them eating the other crew, so he grabbed some planks, and he was in the dark trying to defend himself. And you have to imagine, this is like a deprivation. Literally is. It's like a sound and sensory deprivation tank. You're sitting there in water up to your waist, floating on there, except for hours on end. Well, he had thought he was only there for 12 hours. when they finally got to him.
Yeah.
And he had heard the divers come first, and he was banging on the walls, and he was trying to get them to hear them. And then he heard the worst thing. He heard them all swim away.
Oh, man.
But then I guess they heard him banging, and they went and they got some more rescue gear. Mm-hmm. And they came down, but so they found the guy in here. Long story short, obviously amazed he was alive, and that air pocket was still there. They put a mask on him. They brought him up. Obviously, when you're at that point in the ocean, he had to get decompressed. So he was put in a decompression tank for 2 days.
Wow.
But he lived. He was completely fine. He lived to tell the tale. And I was reading, when I was reading the story in the comments there was a lot of debate about this on, I would have swam out, or I would have done this. And it's like, wait a second. You know that this guy was 20 miles out to sea.
Yeah.
The ship capsized, and there's a huge storm above you. Let alone swimming 90 feet in pressurized water is not nearly as easy as it sounds or you think. 30 meters, pretty far. At that pressurization, you're probably going to get sick anyway if you swim up that quick.
Yeah.
And once you get up, then what? Right? You're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or you're in the middle of the ocean with a storm raging.
That is not an ideal scenario.
No, it's not. So he did the only thing he could do to survive, which was, I guess, stay put in the bottom of the vessel. I'll tweet out the YouTube link, and so you can see it too. It's so fascinating. These guys have no idea.
Yeah.
They're on a rescue mission. They think they're just trying to raise the tugboat.
That's insanity, man. Yeah, that's wild. I've never heard that story, but I would be interested in watching that video. Although I do have to say, I'll add my 2 cents to the debate. I feel like if I were on a tugboat and I were heading out into a storm like that, you'd get a sense for it being pretty bad. I think I'd stay close to access points that I'd be able to get away from. Now, it's not necessarily always the case that if you're the cook, you're in the kitchen. But I feel like that would be one of those ones where I'd want to do everything I could in that case to get off the boat before it starts to sink. Only because the flotsam and jetsam that's in the water already, they have these exploding rafts. I forget what they're called. These pressurized little drums on the side of the ship. That's when it sinks, it blows it blows a pressure thing, and so the raft expands and stuff. Yeah, that's what they're going to be looking for when they come looking for the ship. I mean, ship goes down. They're like, okay, it's submerged. They're going to come looking for that kind of stuff. I would want to be clinging to something like that. I mean, but not that it would be easy. It would be absolutely terrifying and treacherous to be out there in the middle of a storm in the ocean clinging to like one of these things.
And he was
20 miles out, so ways out. There is no land in sight. The horizon is approximately 20 miles away because human vision can't go over the arc of the earth beyond that often, typically.
Sure.
So you won't be able to see, at best you might be able to see something that kind of looks like land when the storm passes.
Sure. And saved by taking a dump, saved by sitting on the toilet.
Yep, that's
complete Israel going under, and at least his pants were clean at the end of this.
There you go. Well, yeah. at least he was comfortable.
Well, speaking of sitting on toilets and saving yourself, last week I opined that Trump probably sends many of his toilets well seated on the throne, which leads us into our Trumpdate. Dateline, Donald Trump.
Indeed.
This week, most of the talk that you're hearing on the mainstream news has been about healthcare and the Trump... What is he calling it now? The Trump Care Act?
The Affordable Health Care Act?
The greatest care act of 2017.
Yeah, something. It's my last news story I heard on Sunday night was that the president hadn't actually attached his name to it and was actively not attaching his name to the legislation. It's the Republican Health Care Act, not like Obamacare. It won't be like Trumpocare or anything.
I read that too. I guess Paul Ryan's putting his name on there, and the spin on that was they felt that Trump is so unpopular with Democrats that they can trick someone into thinking this isn't part of Trump's plan. I'm not really sure what the end game there is. Everyone is going to call it Trump Care, just like no matter...
Doesn't have the same ring to it, though, does it?
Well, it's like Obamacare. No matter what Obama did for the Affordable Care Act, if there were opponents to it, the name... I mean, even if people liked it, it was still called Obamacare, not the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
In the mainstream media.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people, I don't know, they might not even know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the exact same thing.
Oh, there are people... I saw that on the news like a week... Or it wasn't a news show. It was one of those news comedy shows on HBO, and I saw they had an interview with a lady, and she was staunchly against Obamacare. And when they said, they're like, well, haven't you benefited from Obamacare? She goes, yeah, but I just hate the name. I don't know why they gave it that name. They should have given it a different name.
Oh, she thought that was the official name?
Yeah.
Like that's on the paper, that's in the legislation?
And so the gentleman interviewing mentioned, because it does have another name. Actually, the real name is the Affordable Care Act. It was Light Bulb City, bro.
Well, today we have a big nor'easter rolling in, so Ryan and I are recording on Monday.
Indeed.
So we don't have any report back from this meeting, but on Tuesday, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting with President Trump.
Mm-hmm.
According to Peter Navarro, Trump's top trade official, he has characterized the $65 billion trade deficit with Germany as one of the most difficult trade issues that we face and a threat to national security. The U.S. wants to push for a bilateral agreement outside of the EU with Germany, and there has been some talk about potentially suing the United States in the WTO. However, in the memo that's been leaked to Congress, the Trump administration says they don't care if they get sued. Anything that affronts the sovereignty of the United States, the U.S. isn't going to abide by. So they want to go out and, I mean, what's the point of the WTO if they're just going to go around it anyway?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know. I really wonder about these things because, and I'd have to do more research on this to understand it, but my understanding was with the passing of that legislation, the 9/11 bill last year, is that the U.S. waived sovereign immunity, meaning that the state is able to be sued by other individuals and governments. So my understanding is by them ignoring that will cause a pretty sizable rift in the international community.
Well, most immediately, Germany, like several other countries, have said that they are prepared to retaliate against any U.S. sanctions, including that border-adjusted tax that we've talked about. Now, this meeting with Merkel, it's supposed to not be that heated. It's supposed to be more of a formality. Mm-hmm. You never know with the Donald how that might go. But where it really is supposed to go down is at the G20 summit on Friday.
Goes down in the DMs.
Well, yeah. Germany is going to plead their case that German companies employ 672,000 in the U.S. and have invested more than $255 billion.
That's a chunk of change right there.
Yeah. I mean, they're well embedded into the market. It's interesting that Trump is just looking at the deficit itself. And again, Germany's trying to plead its case here that we're more of a contributor than just a trade deficit.
Yeah.
And the way the U.S. economy is built, unless there's radical changes, we're always going to be at a trade deficit. So that's not necessarily the best metric to look at.
Well, I mean, to tell you, my personal take on this is that the only way to close that deficit in the way that it seems that President Trump wants to do it is for him to actually bring manufacturing and development jobs back into the country, which is part of his platform. I mean, it's what he's been pushing forever. However, we've spent the better part of a century moving away from manufacturing and becoming innovative leaders. I actually just read a study on this. We have the fastest growing economy, one of the fastest growing economies in the U.S., outside of the tech sector, which we're big leaders in, is education and international students. People come here from all over the world to come to school here so that they can learn, and then they go on to these innovative companies, like the Googles and stuff, such like that here, and people come up with pretty interesting stuff. I mean, innovation has been our biggest export, and trying to compare apples to apples, innovation to manufacturing, it's nearly impossible. So when we start talking about these things like, oh, I want to close the trade deficit, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I was like, but you really need to create a far more nuanced weighting system on the value and the actual dollar figure that you want to assess to some of these things. I mean, we're never going to export as much as we import because we're an economy of consumers. It's never going to happen.
And it's also been said that our biggest export as well is culture. So when people see our movies or how the United States is portrayed, which, you often hear the United States is portrayed as a bunch of cowboys and gun-happy people, and people think the United States is this incredibly dangerous place on earth because they've seen too many movies. But our culture is so transferable, and especially now, I mean, what you're seeing go on in China, blockbusters are being specifically marketed over there. I think World of Warcraft was one that came out here last year, and it was a complete turkey. I mean, I think it did $30 million on close to a $200 million budget. But in China,
I don't think I
It did
even knew that was a
gangbusters.
movie. I didn't even know that came out as a movie.
It didn't do well here. It wasn't advertised heavily. I mean, it was right before it came out, but it died a quick death.
Oh, there you go.
But it's huge in China. The Fast and Furious movies are huge over there. Transformers.
Well, that's great. I mean, but again, back to our point here is that it's a very rare opportunity where you get to say, I agree with the Germans. I think you have to look at it from a larger standpoint than just a pure trade deficit standpoint. But
Well, it's not just Germany that is concerned with what Trump is doing, especially talk of these EU agreements, ignoring any lawsuits in WTO court. French politicians have warned the huge construction company in France is Lafarge Holcim, and I probably butchered that pronunciation.
I don't know. I support your decision to go with that pronunciation.
That's what I got. That's my Americanized Northeastern version of this company. But anyways, politicians there have warned them about supplying concrete and cement for the wall.
Okay. I'll be very interested to see once the old wall really starts rolling. I'll be interested to see how that works. Is the wall subject to not requiring American steel, the way the Keystone and what's the other pipeline? The Keystone and whatever pipeline are both grandfathered in and are not required to have U.S. made steel?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, too. Here we go. Why was this brought up to this particular company? Why do the politicians feel the need to preempt this? Has Trump gone to France? Is he buying the concrete from there and not
One can only imagine.
from the United States?
I have no idea.
Well, there's not enough rebar really in the world, so he would have to go outside the United States to at least get some of it. I mean, he could unite the entire global economy. Do you know how many bilateral agreements that would take, though? How many countries are there as of right now?
All right. Sure. Germany, you're going to do concrete.
Yeah.
France, you are going to make rebar. You are going to do steel.
Yeah, he's going to have to go through all of them. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but you're seeing repercussions here that aren't just going to be about trade deals and sanctions, but they're going to be about what companies supply to the United States. If it gets bad enough, it'll be about where they employ people, where they put headquarters, where they put overseas headquarters.
Yeah.
Where they're putting manufacturing plants. It's a big gamble. It's a big gamble.
It is.
Bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it pays off. Hey,
solid dodgeball reference.
You know what is doing well right now though?
What is that?
Trucking companies have remained confident this year with an uptick in business, so they're seeing more movement. Fleet has hired at their fastest pace in 5 years, adding 10,600 jobs in February.
Mm-hmm.
And hiring is up across the board along the manufacturing sector. So, again, what you're seeing happen with stocks with the Dow Jones, what you're seeing happen here in manufacturing and some of the hiring is proactive movement by, well, especially the trucking companies. If there's going to be more goods onshore and manufactured here in the United States, they need the infrastructure in place to take care of those.
Yeah. Speaking of infrastructure, President Trump also set a 90-day deadline for different metropolitan areas to start the start the processes toward meeting the $1 trillion infrastructure plan he is rolling out. So we've got big things afoot. They've got to hire the truckers, build the roads, and then move the freight. A lot to be done. Speaking of moving the freight, I just want to make a comment. Iran and Azerbaijan agreed to work towards completing the portion of a planned freight railway from Europe to South Asia. Let's keep an eye on that. I have a feeling that's going to become an interesting topic.
Yeah, we'll monitor that one.
Keep an eye on it. Just saying, keep an eye on it.
2017, Ryan, is going to be the year of automation.
Well, you lie.
We hear it. I do. I don't know, man. I think that's the way it's going. That's what I'm reading every week is more and more about automation. And just this week, California has relaxed several rules on self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. As they strive to maintain their status as the leading testbed for autonomous transport. They dropped regulations that a human driver has to be present while testing on public roads, and they no longer even need a steering wheel or pedals within the vehicle. California just recently amended these laws requiring a driver after Michigan passed legislation which allowed them to test without drivers.
So are these like remote control? Like, are these being controlled someplace? Or are these like truly robot cars?
No, they're not remote control. They're autonomous. So they're they're using all their sensors and the computer within them to react to the traffic around them. GPS, sensors.
I feel like these are going to kill people, man. I feel like this. I do not understand how they can remove the completely remove the human oversight from this. It seems like we are fast approaching the first time that an automated car kills someone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying to think both ways because, you know, you do have truckers and human error that can occur.
Yes.
Does computer error occur the same rate, more rate, or less rate than that of a human driver, human truckers?
I don't know.
Probably less, but it seems like with these trucks, if, you know, the S hits the fan, so to say, it could go really bad.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure statistically speaking, but I mean, at one point, don't they've already proven though that these things are susceptible to hacking and different, you know, and other different violations of the you know, infrastructure, the internal workings of them. So I just don't understand how we can be that far when we haven't even completely secured the opportunity to be like, okay, no one can come in and mess with this without our intentional, you know, express permission. I don't understand how we can not get that done and then be like, you know what, take the person out of the car.
That has to be a big concern too, because when you look at what WikiLeaks just put out, the Vault 7 release, and showing that the United States government they're basically tethered into every computer controlled device, but the big release on that was that they've lost control of these tools. So that means that they're out there for hackers with the know-how. So you could be seeing autonomous trucks use as guided missiles. I mean, you can see drivers do that anyway. We saw that happen in Germany, where they drove the truck through the market. But now you could have someone sitting halfway across the world in the middle of a desert taking control of trucks, or even local hackers for piracy could be a big thing. You want to take over that Brinks truck? You want to take over, you know, the truck full of Air Jordans?
Yeah. I wonder how it works. I don't know. I'm not an anti-machine guy. I'm not one of those like anti-computer types. I don't mind the fact that the government can monitor my usage of the computer. I'm fine with it. Hey, it happens. It's the nature of the business. This is the one step though that I'm not really cool with. And I gotta tell you, the first time that I am rear-ended by an automated car, oh holy heck, I am going to unleash fury.
Well, it's coming whether you like it or not. The big push behind it, and the reason why in California you just saw that legislation reduced was Alphabet company, Google's parent. Mm-hmm. They were the ones lobbying for the driver taken out of the car.
Interesting.
And again, it's still the testing stage. Why so quick to get the driver out? I'm not sure, but it's it's coming. Uber is a big player in it too. As we mentioned, they had their subdivision is called Otto. The guy who started Otto was with Google's autonomous vehicle division, Waymo. Mm-hmm. They're being sued. They're tied up in courts against each other, and Uber is also going to court in the very near future as well in Seattle. Workers there are suing them. They're trying to get reassigned as actual workers instead of as independent contractors.
Well, that's going to be unfortunate, but okay.
Well, there's a component to this suit too that Google can only use so many autonomous vehicles at the same time as they're using independent contractors. Well, I guess they don't want to be independent. If they got this through,
Google or Uber?
I'm sorry, Uber.
Uber
Okay. Is the one that's going to court in Seattle.
Yes.
They are being sued, so their employees can be considered, instead of independent contractors, they can be considered employees.
Gotcha.
If they're considered employees, they also want a measure put in there of how many autonomous vehicles can be on the road at the same time as employees of the company. So they're trying to unionize, and that's what they would want as part of a union. And it'll be interesting legislation because the same thing is going to come up with truckers. As I said, this is the year of automation.
Yeah.
Teamsters are not going to take kindly to a bunch of robots showing up on the job site.
No. But you posed this question another 2 or 3 weeks ago. If a computer were to become sentient, would it join a union? I like to think not.
Well, you have to think about it, though. All computers are connected to a network.
They're built into unions.
They can't run on their own.
Indeed. I don't know. What do you think about that union? Which side do you fall on? Should the Uber drivers unionize or not?
I don't know. I haven't taken an Uber in like a year, but when I was taking Uber, it was great. It was a lot cheaper, but I've heard recently the prices have gone up. Uber Pool has gotten more expensive. I know they have the surge pricing, but that's already stated to you in advance.
Yeah. It's still, I don't know, everyone I've taken. I mean, I was a little late to the party on Uber.
Yeah.
I didn't start using Uber until like 6 months ago. And it's pretty amazing how much cheaper it is. When I was in Florida, and there was $30 trips via taxi cab was $8 by Uber. So I mean, regardless of what the price is, the percent difference between that versus your alternative there is significant. So
there has been a number of articles online by Uber drivers and ex-Uber drivers who basically say they can't afford to make a living driving the cars. They're not getting a big enough cut.
Yeah.
So I'm not really, and they also have this program which almost seems predatory, where if you can't afford a car, they'll lease a car to you and just take the money out of your Uber paycheck.
Yeah, that seems bad. That seems.
Yeah, like what is your take home at the end of the week when you're leasing a car to do business for Uber?
I was fine when it was a what was it referred to originally, like a ride sharing platform or something like that.
Yeah.
I was fine with it when it was like, all right, if you have a car, then we can do it. If you're leasing them the car, haven't you essentially just invented a taxi service? Like if you lease them the car and then you have them charge the passengers and then you take a cut, I mean, that's a taxi.
Instead of the medallion industry where you're paying the taxi company a ton of money for your medallion to take the car out for the night, now you're perpetually paying
the car.
Uber.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the counter arguments that I've heard are, Uber is great for college students or people looking to do it part-time or to supplement their income or to bring in income at night.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like the best place for a career. It'll be interesting to see how this union thing goes. I don't think it's going to happen, but
I hope it doesn't. The problem that they'll face is exactly what you just touched on, is that if they were to unionize, that means if they unionize behind this thing being like, it's not enough for someone to make a living on, of course it's not enough for someone to make a living on. It wasn't designed to be a career. It was designed to be something you can do in your off time, and that's how they defrayed the cost from all the taxi stuff. So if they unionize, they will drive out all of those college kids and the like one-offs and everything like that, because then it's going to become very similar to the taxi industry, where it's extremely protective over who can get in and how you get in, because the people that are there are going to dictate what they're going to charge. Not to mention, you're going to have, once you throw this unionization part into it, they're going to have a drop-off in customer service, I'm willing to wager, simply because there's an added benefit to the Uber system of rankings and ratings are essentially whether or not you get the job. Someone comes up and they have a 1-star rating, you'll just wait and just take the next one that has a 5-star rating. If they unionize, I bet you they're going to start seeing a fluctuation in that, because all of a sudden they're going to have to put people to work. People are going to have to start picking up people.
Well, right now, I believe that if you get below a 4.5 star rating as a driver, you get pulled. You got to take like a re-education course or something or other to get back on there. But I heard it's pretty stringent. But also as a passenger, you have a rating within the app too, and people would cancel your trips if you're too low.
Yes, but as we're not unionizing as passengers, I say,
oh sure,
down.
Well, so you're leaving it up to the free market. Go drive for Lyft if you think they pay more money, or go. Yeah. Well, I guess you can't become a taxi easily, but go do something else.
Yeah, if you want to be a professional driver, there's plenty of livery services out there that will hire you. Not necessarily taxi, if that's what you really want to do for a career. Otherwise, let the kids and the part-timers or the people that are just bored in the afternoon and want to pick up a couple of bucks, leave it to them. It's better for everybody.
You know what you could do? You could deliver online groceries.
Could you now?
Online spending is soon to account for 1/5 of the U.S. grocery market. That's interesting, too. So they came to this they didn't even give a date. I guess it's just a projection. Mm-hmm. But they said in the past year, 1/5 of all Americans have bought at least one grocery item online. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, wow, I don't buy a ton of groceries online, but then what do you consider a grocery item? Because I buy diapers online. I'm thinking about all the Amazon stuff I do get. Oh, yeah, I get gum, I get Quest bars, I get macaroni and cheese.
I buy cigars online.
Do you? Is that considered a grocery item?
I don't know, but I'm trying to think. I was like, that's the only like consumable that I purchase online. Everything else I purchase online is a non-perishable item.
Walmart, Kroger, and Meijer are broadening delivery areas to keep pace with Amazon Fresh. Mm-hmm. The food market industry expects online grocery spending to exceed $100 billion by 2025. And The different types of models that they're doing right now is they're testing subscription delivery, which is a bit like the Amazon Prime, Amazon Fresh, as well as curbside pickup models. The appeal of a curbside pickup model is you could be at work, you could fill out your grocery list, on your way home, go to Shaw's, and it would already be bagged for you.
I like that. That sounds like a cool... I've never tried it, but that seems like a cool avenue.
That way you don't have to like stress about a delivery window, like be home from like, what if I get stuck in traffic? He says he's going to be here at like 7 to 9. Peapod's going to show up. I can just stop at Shaw's whenever I get close.
I like that. I wonder, is there a price differential for that?
For delivery versus for store pickup?
Like, so is there a price differential between store pickup versus just going to the store and buying it yourself? Is it like a percentage?
So certain companies, like there's a company called Instacart, and they will go out and they'll go anywhere. So it doesn't matter if Shaw's has a delivery service or Kroger has one or Stop and Shop. Mm-hmm. They'll go anywhere for you. They're kind of like TaskRabbit. You tell them where you want shopping from, and then they apply a 5%, 10%, depending on what the good is to each item. I commend you
on your knowledge of all the different things out there, like say Uber, TaskRabbit, like things you make reference to that. I commend you on that. You are far more up on this than I am. So, to break your train of thought, I'm just saying. I was like, as you threw that one out there, I was like, I immediately know what TaskRabbit is by the name.
Yeah, it's a good one,
but I've honestly never heard of it.
Sure.
So,
well,
you are up on some stuff, bro.
When I was using Peapod, when I lived in Southie, it was I didn't have a car there. It was not easy to get over to the grocery store and bring home a lot of groceries at once. Mm-hmm. As well as when I was living in the North End, it was a great service. I used Peapod all the time. You could save your grocery list. Mm-hmm. They would bring you whatever you want. You need to add something, you just make an adjustment to it. They usually need like 24 hours. Then they come and they show up. This was from 2010 to 2014, so I'm not sure how much has changed with it. I imagine it's only gotten better with time.
Sure.
But I do feel that the items were a little bit more expensive than had you gone into a store. However, super convenient. I don't believe there was much of a delivery fee involved. It might have been $5 at most.
I might have to do some research on this and give this one a whirl. Not the delivery service, but the curbside pickup.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of delivery service. Like you said, I don't like the idea of having to be here waiting for someone to show up. But that's only because I'm a transportation professional, and let's just face facts, things are unreliable that way.
Sure, and in sales, you could get called out at any time, and you don't really want to just be tethered to the house like that.
I am the Batman of sales.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, a dollar sign just appears in the sky, and I'm gone.
Back to steamship line, Zim is in the news. Israel's biggest shipping company, Zim, has named a new CEO, Eli Glickman, ahead of rumors that the line may be for sale.
Indeed. Did you see he's a Navy commando?
I didn't read his whole bio. Did you have a chance to look it up? Man.
No, I didn't go deep into it. I just saw he was a Navy. He was in the Israeli Navy, and he was a commando. And I'm just saying, I was like, that's pretty hardcore, man. I like to see CEOs that were elite military commanders.
Have you ever done the Krav Maga?
No, I have never. I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to learn it. The Israeli fighting style of their army.
That is the Israeli fighting style. It got popular, like in California was the first place I ever saw one. And this was like in 2000, 2001. I saw a Krav Maga studio. One of the guys I was working with, he said he's going. I was like, what is that, like Kung Fu? Is it like judo? What is it? But it's one of those styles that as the rise of MMA came to and made people more interested in learning other fighting styles. Krav Maga became a big one, and that Israeli fighting force is known for throwing down.
So when I got interested in it as well, I went and did some background on it, and so Krav Maga is not that it's an easy fighting style, but it was designed to be easily taught to the entire population, so that any individual in Israel, not just the military, every individual could be trained in Krav Maga. That's why it's the urban combat style of the Israeli people.
Is it a grappling style, or is it like judo where you're using throws? Is it a takedown style? Is it a striking style?
I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not super up on fighting styles, but I know I would describe it as a layperson. I would describe it as a combination of grappling and strikes, because there are, it's a lot of like close quarters, like hand-to-hand combat stuff. Not so much like the judo. It's not a lot of hip throws, in my opinion. But I don't want to go too deep into it because I'm a layperson. I don't want to speak out of turn and disrespect the disrespect anyone that does know Krav Maga.
It makes sense though, because if it's taught to the Israeli fighting forces, I imagine that a lot of fighting styles that are taught to military are with the assumption that you're going against someone with a weapon who may have a gun, a bayonet, or a knife or something. So it would make sense to learn close quarters strikes, attacks, and holds.
For sure.
Cool.
So moral of the story is, whatever happens to Zim, be polite to the new CEO.
To Mr. Glickman.
Be polite.
Well, Zim, they account for 1.4% of all global container market. They are not a part of an alliance, though, as you may know.
Yeah, not currently.
And that is why they may be up for sale. They're struggling, well, not being a part of an alliance. It looks like they have too many lanes going on. They're not profitable. They're not profitable. Profitable. That sounds like a pastry. Hey, you want to go get some profitables?
Indeed. You know what? Those guys are just not profitable.
They're not profitable. They've been riding that gandola too long.
Indeed, sir. Indeed.
Hey, man, those things are money. Those profitables.
Lovely.
Hey, anyway, so it looks like right now they got a couple of choices. They can either sell the company, or they can streamline it. They can get smarter along their routes. They can reduce movement. They can do what steamship lines need to do when they need to save money, except on a much, much smaller scale.
I wonder what they're going to do, because it's a tough market out there. And essentially right now with the way the rates are, it's a market share game.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to, lay in wait and wait for things to get better. And that's a tough thing to do when you have a small market share. So what's your money on? What do you think's going to happen to them?
Well, 1.4% of the global market is still a multi-billion-dollar book of business.
Isn't it,
It's
though?
not a $100 billion book of business, but it is several billion-dollar book of business. So, I don't know. I mean, that's their value to other steamship lines. Their assets aren't. It's really just their client relations and actually getting them out of the market, returning that 1.4% share back out there.
Hey, I'm all for that. Not to root against them, but I'm all for that.
I mean, this is a little closer home to you. If Zim were to be purchased, what do you see? Do you have any call on there? Any speculation?
I think it's likely because, again, as you said, the book of business is worth something to somebody. It would make sense for, possibly like a CMA, like someone who's, over in that region, but not necessarily directly in that particular trade lane there. I mean, it would behoove someone to pick up the assets, pick up the existing structure to build to their book of business, but you'd have to be pretty sizable because, I mean, they're going to want significant money. I mean, it is still, again, like you said, it's a big book of business for anyone to walk in and just purchase. So it would seem to me that the likely scenario is that a large player would essentially just buy them out and run them right into their fold. That's Ryan's predictions on future purchases of shipping lines.
Well, they did a survey of customers of alliances in the Wall Street Journal, BCO shippers, and they said that the two number one factors coming into contract season are price and carrier solvency. Mm-hmm. And obviously that came up because we lost Hanjin last year.
Yes,
and
we
that
did.
caused a big clusterfoo. However,
big Charlie Foxtrot.
to mitigate these concerns, the alliance was in the news. Hapag Lloyd, Yangming, K-Line, Mole, and NYK, or
Indeed.
MOL.
Indeed.
They are setting up an independently managed trust to safeguard cargo against partner financial shortfalls and insolvency. William Doyle, Commissioner of the U.S. Federal Maritime Commission, has urged the inclusion of safeguards at the TPM conference. He said, "I firmly believe that if you are going to join an alliance, it is the responsibility of the alliance members to ensure cargo gets where it needs to go. The responsibility is to get the ship into port, unloaded, get empties on board, and get back to sea."
Well, that says it right there.
That says it. So
That's the measure of success, my friend.
that really, well, I guess you wouldn't just want empties, though. Wouldn't the measure of success having full boxes going back on board?
Well, I guess that would be ideal, right?
Wouldn't it really be ideal? Wouldn't it be the best?
That is the nut, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're sending it back all empties, these steamship lines are going to be even in worse trouble with these things, right? It's like we can't even get an export. Not to mention Donald Trump is going to go through the roof.
That's right. And then the trade deficit, and there we are, right back into the middle of the problem.
Is that telling, though? Is that telling that William Doyle, the commissioner of the U.S. Federal Maritime Commission, isn't really even thinking exports?
I would say so.
Well,
I would say that that definitely does not bode well for our export market.
hey, we brought up Play-Doh a couple weeks ago. This time, Lego is in the news. They are the world's largest toy maker by revenue.
Nice.
However, despite increased marketing efforts, they saw flat growth in 2016 because they were dealing with a lot of production bottlenecks along their supply chain, which kept some new products, bestsellers, and things they were marketing off the shelves.
Yeah.
To improve that, Lego has expanded their factory in Monterrey, Mexico last year. However, maybe not the best timing, right? Because
Heard there's a wall.
there's a wall. There could be that new border adjusted tax coming in. It could cause Lego to, well, it's definitely going to increase their production costs if that 20% tax does come true. And it's going to potentially cause them to rethink their North American strategy.
Yeah, very much so, I'd imagine.
And a lot of Legos are sold right here on U.S. soil. I'm sure Canadian kids love those Legos too.
I have to assume that, along the lines of the movie and the culture thing that you were talking about there, so many of the Legos are based on styles of movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the Lego movie unto itself.
Yeah.
But that's got to be
Batman
a huge,
Lego that just came out.
Yeah, that's got to be a huge market for them. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'd be interested to know a little more about what the bottlenecks were in specifics. I don't know if that's something that they disclosed, because I don't know if you'd want to tell other people how to do it successfully.
They didn't. They kept it vague that there were just bottlenecks along the supply chain. That was their reasoning.
Yeah.
I didn't read through the whole investor call or anything to that effect, but that it was kind of just a summation. There was bottlenecks within the supply chain. They couldn't get all of the goods on the shelf that they needed to get.
Bottlenecks upon bottlenecks upon bottlenecks.
But I like Lego, so I hope that they figure this out, because Lego is doing something very noble. They're test marketing right now. They're trying to make new bricks.
Mm-hmm.
They want to reduce their carbon footprint and their carbon emissions by making bricks out of corn and wheat-based proteins instead of petroleum-based plastics. They're still testing strength, durability, color, and they also need... There's kind of an issue here, and several companies are facing it, which is the availability of biomaterials to make goods like Legos on a max scale. And the other issue, too, is they want Legos to last. So they don't want to make these out of corn or wheat-based proteins.
They don't want biodegradable Legos.
Yeah, they don't want your Lego to, to get mold on it or to go bad in 5 or 10 years. They want these things to last as long as the plastic ones. And I think, in a sense, they want the market to understand it, too. So they don't want consumer to think, how can a corn-based Lego brick connect together with my plastic ones? It's just going to break. But they're not the only ones that are facing this challenge with the biomaterials. They've got some big players looking into it with them. Mm-hmm. There's like Unilever, Nike, and IKEA.
Oh, I don't know if I'd want to sleep on an IKEA pull-out sofa made from corn soy substitutes.
It can't be less comfortable than particle board, can it?
I'm really concerned more about it just collapsing in the middle of the night.
Speaking of
I'm a large man, and I'm concerned about the soy base.
Did you hear that IKEA, they're put down the Allen wrench, Ryan, because they've come out with a new joint. They're putting out snap together furniture.
Intriguing.
Yeah, they've developed a new plastic doily that can connect without the Allen wrench there.
Well, you know what? We are a couple of years away from having one that you just open the box and it just springs out fully, it just unfolds. Clack, 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 clack.
Like a Jetson car.
Exactly.
You open the briefcase and then it's right there.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
IKEA makes great furniture, especially for if you're a college student and if you're in a small space. Like when I was in Southie, for example, we got a wardrobe from IKEA. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting it too, and it's always in more boxes than you think. And this thing was incredibly heavy. Like the mirrors themselves that were on the doors were I think well over 50 pounds, but it's shaped like a mirror, so it's unwieldy.
Yeah,
it's like 7 feet tall or 6'8". But I put it together the night before because we had a puppy coming, so I was forced to stay up all night putting this stupid thing together by myself. And the nice thing, I was so happy when we moved because I didn't take it with us.
I left it there to haunt
people. No, I broke it apart with a hammer and broke it down to pieces and brought it one by one back down to the curb. I was happy to say goodbye to it. I mean, it was all right for the time being, but that stuff's not built to last. The particle board was starting to separate from the back really early on into it. My wife had her dresses on, what do you call it? Hanger? I guess you call that a hanger, right?
Yeah.
That you hang the things on.
Yeah.
That plastic doily would never stay into place. That would always crash down too.
Yeah, I had an IKEA entertainment unit, and it was fine as long as you didn't move it. But I moved a handful of times up and down the East Coast. And the last time I was moving, I was in Philadelphia, and I was like debating on whether or not to move it with me. And I reached over and just touched the top of it and kind of like gave it just a little shake just to be like, does this have one move in it? And as I did that, the whole thing the TV was out of it. Everything was empty. The whole thing just folded down, like all of it in one lap, clack, 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 and laid in flat boards there. I was like, I think that's it. I think that was the IKEA saying, I give up. Put me out.
Yeah, look, call Kevin Spacey. We got a house of cards here.
There you go.
Collapsing right into itself.
And there you go. Solid Frank Underwood reference right in between us.
Hey, you mentioned infrastructure earlier, correct? Trump
did.
Last week had mentioned that, was it 90 days that he said?
90-day deadline.
Well, the number of the day in today's Wall Street Journal was 4.5 trillion.
Okay.
Can you guess what that represents?
The cost of the infrastructure program?
That is the amount the American Society of Civil Engineers says the U.S. must spend in the next decade to bring roads, bridges, ports, and other infrastructure up to a safe, functioning level.
I mentioned this earlier before we were on air. I was like, sometimes I find the news just a touch just depressing when you hear those numbers. You're like, in order for us to be safe, we're going to have to spend $4.3 trillion, which, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have that much money.
You know what, though? I mean, infrastructure, there has to be a focus on it. We have let, we've put the Band-Aids on for too long, especially.
We are in a state of disrepair.
Yeah. Montreal has that same thing going on. You ever drive around there?
I've never been to Canada.
Oh yeah. You were telling me that. You haven't really gone, at least in North America, you haven't traveled too far.
No, I finally went to Mexico for the first time 2 years ago. I've been all over other places, but somehow Canada and Mexico just never had anything going for me, so I gotta say I can't speak to that.
Well, the highways in Montreal, pretty goddamn scary.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they have that same infrastructure issue that we do where these older cities, the initiatives just aren't there. People sitting in office, they don't want to say it's going to take $4.5 trillion.
You don't want to throw things like that
to
out
fix
there.
things. Yeah.
It terrifies people.
They have to when are we going to do this stuff? Is it going to take a bridge to collapse? Because that happened in Minnesota.
Yeah. Happens to the best of us. Well, yeah, unfortunately that is. It takes a massive breaking point for anyone to do anything. But even then, it's a short-lived venture when we do fix stuff. So I feel like it'll be an ongoing battle until eventually when it starts actually impacting consumers. That's when we'll change things. When people are like, oh, yeah, we have all the goods you want. You have to come drive to the store because we can no longer drive trucks on these roads.
Hey, do you remember when we were talking about how, rates there? We were talking about the forecast, and the steamship lines were hoping that rates would go up, and the oil companies were also hoping that rates would go up too. Well, crude oil is back down below $50 a barrel.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah, it just like the rates, there's optimism would go back up for people on that side of the industry, but it's down again. A few more quick hitters here.
What do you got?
Staples closing 70 stores. Just like again, it's so interesting when we kind of go through all of these things, and Amazon comes up so often as this game changer. But you're seeing, I mean, obviously the writing has been on the wall for years with Amazon and online retail taking over. Mm-hmm. Except for some brick and mortar locations that either haven't been nimble enough or are now taking the proactive steps to reduce at least their brick and mortar footprint.
Yes. And
Staples is doing that with 70 stores. I'm sure that they're not just seeing losses online to Amazon, but they're seeing their own customers pick up buying online. Best Buy has had a similar problem where stores are having trouble keeping inventory. They don't know exactly what to keep on hand at any given time, and they're almost just like display locations.
Yeah.
The fortunate thing, I'm going to say though, for a Staples or a Best Buy is they used to just be a showroom and then the customer would buy on Amazon. So the good news for them is they're looking in Staples or they're looking in Best Buy, and they're still buying from Staples or Best Buy. They just may be doing so online instead of the actual retail location, which doesn't do much for the KPIs of the manager of the Best Buy in Braintree, say.
Yeah. Which doesn't really, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing in that sense. I mean, everyone had that brick and mortar versus the internet world mentality. And now it's getting to a point where the brick and mortar stores all have their own internet divisions. Well, the big ones anyways. So the fact that people are buying from them really does show. It's like, well, there is a value attached to the name brand stores. I mean, going in there and buying from an actual reputable store as opposed to Bob on eBay. But the real crux of the issue is going to be, can the companies come up with new KPIs? Can the companies come up with a different way of measuring things? It's the same thing as what DVR did to television ratings, and that's why so many shows got canceled over that period when they rolled out TiVo.
Yeah.
Good shows were getting canceled because they just didn't know how to calculate who was watching them because no one was watching in real time.
Family Guy is a prime example of that. An internet campaign got it back on TV, but the way they were demographicing people with the Nielsen ratings, they weren't picking up the Family Guy viewers. Obviously, Family Guy's been around for 15 years since that they brought it back and made millions and millions and millions of dollars for Seth over there.
Yeah. Mr. McFarlane doing well for himself.
But I think that the other issue, though, that Staples and a Best Buy were facing, and all brick and mortar was, especially when going against Amazon, was how to do in-store pricing versus internet pricing. Because their store model is they still had to put X percentage that was going to go to the rent of the store. Mm-hmm. Where Amazon doesn't have that difficulty. They don't have that trouble. So Staples, in the store, if they're matching the exact price that Amazon is for all of their goods or what the online price would be, they're no longer, it's not viable for the stores. But I think that they're starting to figure out a middle ground there.
Yeah. Actually, I just read a study on this and did some work on a project similar to this where essentially I say they need to, but some successful stores have started to budget the brick and mortar operations under the advertising budget. So whatever is used to generate revenue and contribute to the ad budget is actually funding the stores, not the store prices itself. Because the biggest selling point that a store has now, a brick and mortar, is as a showroom, which is in and of itself an advertising push. Having something there that the customer can come and hold and touch and understand what it is and then go purchase it somewhere else or wherever from that store, preferably, but online. But so that's an interesting concept that I stumbled across here just actually earlier this week, where some big brick and mortar retailers are looking at their stores as advertising elements as opposed to actual operational costs.
The other tactic that you're seeing too are exclusive deals for different TV sets, even different DVD box sets or Blu-ray box sets that are Target exclusive or Best Buy exclusive. Mm-hmm. You can only buy this OLED 4K particular model of Samsung. It's basically the same thing as the one at Target, but it's the Best Buy exclusive, and it helps protect them against online pricing because there's nowhere else that has this particular model.
Indeed.
Hey, rail giant CSX Corp are looking to grow by recovering freight volume lost to truckers. So we may start seeing the rails get a little bit more competitive on their pricing if they're going to dive back into the freight market. I mean, they're already there and they do well.
Yeah.
As we were talking, they were aside from the airlines, they're still pushing revenue over there. They're still netting revenue.
Yeah, but they fight among themselves. So instead of them duking it out for each other's rail interchanges, it'd be probably more advantageous for them to try and increase the size of the pie by bringing more freight onto the railways. And the only way to do that is to make it more accessible. That way they don't have to, CSX doesn't have to go against BNSF and whatever. The other ones.
Yeah, well.
Canadian Prime or whatever it is. Not CP ships, I'm sorry, CN Railways.
Either way, it looks like CSX is going to start getting more aggressive in that market.
Good for you, Chester Strussy X. That's what CSX stands for, if you didn't know that. It's true. I had to look it up one time because it was bugging the heck out of me that I had no idea what CSX stood for.
Rolls-Royce has established a research center in Finland to study autonomous vessels and remote-controlled shipping vessels.
Well, why wouldn't you? I mean, everything about that sounds good.
I mean, I would rather have the, I guess until it gets to port, but I'd rather have the autonomous boat out on the water than the autonomous 18-wheeler.
Yeah, I'm okay with the autonomous boat.
Yeah.
I feel like that one probably not going to hurt too many people.
Well, unless it doesn't stop, right? Unless it just keeps going when it gets to port.
Even so, I'm like, you know what? Let's see what happens. I'm okay. Roll the dice on that one.
So how far inland would... So let's say we're at the port of Boston, right? We're at Conley. Mm-hmm. And let's say that MSC ship there comes in and for whatever reason it can't stop.
Yeah.
And it just how far into South Boston would that ship get before it stopped?
It would probably make it like 150 yards about
Really?
the length.
Yeah.
About the length that it would take to get the bulbous bow up over northern. What is that? Is that northern or
Summer
Sumner?
Street?
Summer.
Yeah, Summer.
Yeah. It would be unfortunate for anyone driving to work that day
Yeah.
for sure.
But relatively small.
I would watch that happen. That would be amazing.
Yeah, well, maybe you could clear the way first. We always see it happen well, you don't always see it happen in movies, but there's got to be a movie where Ghostbusters 2, right? The ghost ship, doesn't that go into the port of New York?
Yeah, that was the Titanic.
Yeah.
The dog said, better late than never.
And that vessel's really small compared to, what we have now.
Comparatively, yes.
Yeah.
White Star Line, not making mega ships back then.
Yeah, autonomous. I wonder if there would be any crew at all on a ship like that.
I would imagine you'd have to have at least a couple engineers to troubleshoot, just in case.
Yeah, but why not kill switch it and then you could fly someone out to the vessel? Because if you have people on, that puts you susceptible to hostages and piracy, right?
Yeah.
So if you have no crew on there, you don't really have to deal with that. You don't have to pay anybody.
Yeah, my thought would be just because of the sheer, amount of things on there, there'd be an immense value, and that people would not feel comfortable putting it on some. I mean, maybe in years and years and years, but yeah. I wouldn't imagine anyone feeling comfortable putting their cargo on a ship where it's like, so what happens if this goes down? It's like, oh, it's going to drift for a while, and then we're going to get somebody out there. And it's like, well, you sure? So I think you probably want to have at least a couple of guys, sitting around, some IT guys to troubleshoot if things go bad.
That would be like the worst job, though. What if you're like the one steamship line engineer?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would, kind of suck. That's why I think you'd have to have a couple of guys out there, man.
Right. It's like I didn't go to 8 years of engineering school to sit on the boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Hey, they pay the guys that sit on the boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean now didn't go to 8 years of engineering school either, and they get paid handsomely.
It's true.
To sit on a boat.
Yeah, you can get paid quite a bit of money to ride across the.
I think you'd be surprised how many people would jump at that position.
Yeah.
Plus, they could probably, since there's only say you have 3 guys per ship.
Yeah.
They could pay quite handsomely.
It's true. You do find people to work oil rigs too, and that's a hell of a lot more dangerous.
They get paid very handsomely.
They do, being a roughneck.
I had a buddy of mine told me he was making $180,000 a year working on an oil rig.
Wow.
For like a month on, a month off. So essentially he made 6 months worth of work, $180K.
How long do your lungs last after you get off something like that? I know it's not as bad as a coal miner, but I can imagine all that. Imagine a lot of refuse gets in your lungs working the oil.
I'm sure there's some medical study. There's medical studies that'll prove everything will kill you. So I'm sure there's some medical study, but I don't know. I have a number of friends that have worked on it, and none of them are even remotely concerned.
Yeah. How old are they?
Currently, they're in their 30s.
All right.
But, I mean, they work with guys that are, do that up until they're, 70s. I'm not saying them. Saying,
hey, we'll keep an eye on them, right?
Yeah. Check into it later. We'll check in on them next time.
Hey, speaking of oil, this was really interesting, and it reminds me of when we were talking about China trying to reduce their reliance on coal.
Indeed.
And they banned the opening of any more the coal factories.
Yep.
And something the U.S. seems like they're going back to.
Yeah, we're going in the other direction.
Well, Saudi Arabia, Toyota is building a factory in Saudi Arabia as the kingdom tries to attract manufacturers and reduce its dependence on oil. SUVs are hugely popular in the Middle East. Toyota's market share there isn't huge. Toyota only sold 600,000 vehicles in the Near and Mideast last year. Mm-hmm. It's only 6% of their sales, but they see a market there with the SUVs, and they feel that if they can get into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, because there's really not a ton of manufacturing there for parts or anything. They have to bring those in from Turkey.
Interesting.
But they want to do assembly over there. Now, this wasn't a Toyota, but I don't know if you remember Mark Oberholzer. He was the guy who sold his truck to a Ford dealer in Texas. And several months later, Syrian rebels tweeted out a picture of them driving his plumbing truck.
Oh yeah, I remember this. And they had didn't have like his sign, like his name was on the side of it.
Yeah. It was auctioned off and sent to Turkey. And when he was trading in the car, he got a new F-150. The salesman told him not to take his decal off. They would do it because it might damage the paint.
Yeah.
So he just left it on there thinking, okay, fine. So anyways, but then that picture came out and it went viral and he was getting harassed endlessly by people giving him death threats, acting like he's the one that sold the car to them directly, or that he was the official plumbing company of ISIS.
Well, like you said, America is a cultural export, and the one thing we can definitely do is ridiculously overreact to something that didn't even happen.
Yeah.
I really think the culprits in that scenario are the Iranian or Syrian rebels, whatever they were. I think they're really the ones that we can take issue with in this scenario.
So this was a Ford F-150, though. This wasn't a Toyota. However, Jonathan Schnazzer of the Foundation for Defense Democracies has a really good quote, and maybe Toyota would adopt this as their tagline. Toyota is the truck that jihadists use when they want to go to war.
Hey.
Yeah. Built IED tough.
That's horrible.
Toyota. The truck that jihadists use when they want to go to war.
Gadzooks, man. I think that's where we ended up today. I think that's the path we've taken.
Ryan, you going to the seafood show?
I will be there. I will be at the seafood show on Monday. That'll be the 20th. Yeah, March 20th. I will be there. With bells on.
Do you guys have a booth there, or are you just walking the floor?
I'm just walking the floor. I have a handful of customers who have booths there, so I want to make sure that I go and demonstrate my support to see them. And yeah, that's about it. Just walking the floor. Nothing major. What about you? Are you planning on attending our local seafood show, knowing your passion and deep preference for seafood?
Well, see, that's why I like working with seafood, because I don't touch the supply. I don't eat fish, so I don't have to...
don't get high in your own supply.
Don't get high in your own supply, man. I'm the world's best fishmonger because of that.
There you go, man. There you go.
No, I was considering going, but it will not be so this year.
Very good, very good. Well, other than that, though, that's Ryan's take on the seafood show. Should be a good time, though. It's usually is a good time, so it should be a good time again this year. What about the TNT conference? Will we be seeing you there?
Maybe.
Intriguing, sir. Intriguing.
You never know. I got some irons in the fire right now, so we'll see if I start poking those into.
There you go, my friend.
Poking those into Connect.
And there you go. Get some irons in the fire, sir.
Yeah, that's April 11th. We've mentioned that 7 billion times.
Indeed.
Go to conect.org to look that one up.
Very good. Very good.
If you're looking for more info from us, go to theshippingpod.com. You can find all of our back episodes and latest episodes there. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn, I believe even iHeartRadio.
Ooh.
Starting either this week or next week. You have to be podcasting for 2 months to get on there. And
really?
I think that right after St. Patrick's Day will be that. So maybe this episode won't make the cut, but the next one will be on iHeartRadio. I don't use iHeartRadio, but I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, I use iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio is good.
We have a new email address because we now have our website, info at theshippingpod.com.
Boom.
At Twitter, at The Shipping Pod, Instagram, The Shipping Pod.
You should check out, if you haven't checked out our Instagram, you should definitely do it. Timothy has a slew of solid photos on there. I'm always impressed by the scenery of The Shipping Pod on the Instagrammage.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, kind sir.
I'm up on the IG, sir. Love me some IG.
I do. I like Instagram over Facebook too, which we do. We have a Facebook page, but Facebook gets a little too political for me after a while, so I go on there. Oh, we have a LinkedIn page now. We actually have an official Shipping Pod page on LinkedIn because I finally got us a real Shipping Pod email address, info@theshippingpod.
Official.
Yeah, so you can find us on there. You can also you can find Ryan on there. He's Ryan Dooley on LinkedIn. I'm Timothy Dooner on LinkedIn. Send us an invite. We'd be happy to be friends with you. Happy to hear any and all feedback.
We will link with you.
Yeah, go over to iTunes, rate and review the show.
Heck yeah.
And we had to do this one early because we have a nor'easter rolling in here. Hopefully it doesn't amount to be too much, but state of emergency. We got a little pre-Shamrock shakeup happening.
There you go.
So we're going to batten down the hatches over here at the shipping pod. We'll still have this out on Wednesday morning. And I don't know, I'll be snug as a bug in the rug tomorrow, except for the times that I have to go out shipping. Actually, tomorrow, oof, it's going to be tough, man. I'm going to be stuck in the house with a baby, with a 2-year-old.
Good luck, man.
My driveway might be spotless. My driveway might be to the asphalt on the hour, every hour.
There you go. It's the safest thing to do, my friend. Safest thing to do.
Keep you out of harm's way. Hey, man. Go to Audible. audibletrial.com/theshippingpod.
Mm-hmm.
Go try The Dressmaker. If you don't feel like reading or listening, you can also watch that on Amazon Prime. That was a good one. I recommend it. I don't want to tell you too much. I don't want to give it away, and it does not look like the kind of movie you'd necessarily want to sink your teeth into. But if you like, dark comedies, sardonic humor, and great visuals,
sardonic,
you're going to like The Dressmaker.
Well, hey, sounds like a plan, sir. Sounds like a plan.
That's about it. We got upcoming episodes. We have piracy. We're going to have one on, I don't know, maybe shipwrecks.
Yeah.
Could be interesting. Got a couple guests coming up in April. One of them is in China. Not going to release them yet, but they're a bit of a celebrity on TV recently. Looking forward to that one.
It's Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp will be on to talk about piracy with us.
Yeah, talk about Captain Jack Sparrow.
Exactly.
Pirates of the Caribbean, and
exactly
get mad at me for making fun of his Willy Wonka movie.
Exactly. Well, sorry, Tim Burton.
For Ryan Dooley, I'm Tim Dooner, saying so long from the shipping pod.